how these air pollution measures are simply not working on the ground. Our top focus tonight is an issue that should concern every Indian: air pollution. Take a look.
These visuals are not just disturbing, they are proof of the open betrayal of Delhi. Captured just kilometers from the Supreme Court, they expose who is poisoning Delhi's air under the cover of darkness. When India Today hit the ground at night to check the reality of GRAP 4, the truth was shocking. In the heart of New Delhi, government orders were treated like scrap paper. A cement mixer, which is banned under GRAP 4, was found to be freely roaming in Sarojini Nagar. Inside the site, machines were running, lights were on, RNC plants were operational, pumping dust and poison into Delhi's air. But the moment our cameras appeared, workers fled, machines were shut down, and lights went off instantly.
जैसे हम यहाँ पर पहुँचे कंस्ट्रक्शन साइट पर, लोग हमें देखकर भागने लगे। सब लोग ने यहाँ पर लाइट बंद कर दी और देखते ही देखते पूरी साइड से सारे लोग ऐसे भाग गए जैसे कि यहाँ पर कोई था ही नहीं। रात को यहाँ पर भूत काम कर रहे थे और हमने खुद यहाँ पर एक सीमेंट के ट्रक को अंदर आते हुए पकड़ा और उसी का पीछा करते करते हम इस साइड पर आए। दिल्ली में ग्रैप 4 लगा हुआ है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद भी इन साइटों पर काम चल रहा है सरकार की ठीक नाक के नीचे। ये नई दिल्ली का इलाका है। क्या ला रहे हो?
सीमेंट है।
सीमेंट तो अभी बैन है दिल्ली में लाना।
जी बोले यहाँ ला के खड़ी कर दो।
कहाँ से लाए हो?
ये दादरी।
दादरी से ले आए। दिल्ली में किसी ने नहीं रोका?
नहीं रोका, किसी ने बोले वहाँ जाके गाड़ी खड़ी करनी है।
कहाँ चल रहा है कंस्ट्रक्शन का काम? क्यों भाई?
कोई काम नहीं चल रहा सर।
ये ट्रक कैसे आ गया?
ये मेरा थोड़ी है, उन्हीं का है।
किनका है? कहाँ घूम रहे हो रात को?
काम कर रहे थे सर।
काम हो रहा था ना यहाँ पर?
हाँ, आज तो हो रहा था।
सब ये लाइट बंद करके क्यों भाग गए एकदम से?
कौन? मुझे पता नहीं।
The question is simple. Who allowed work during GRAP 4 and who looked away? At another site nearby, tractors ferried rubble, JCBs operated, trucks hid the number plates in a clear attempt to erase identity. Even worse, guards were burning wood to keep warm, adding smoke to an already toxic night.
कहाँ ले जा रहे हो?
वहाँ से फिट कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे।
रात को प्लांट कैसे चला रखा है?
सर
प्लांट कैसे चला रखा है?
प्लांट बंद है।
गार्ड तुमको ये इन्होंने हीटर नहीं दिया? क्यों?
मिलने वाला है।
कब से काम चल रहा है रात में यहाँ?
रात में काम नहीं चल रहा।
कंपनी वो नहीं देती है हीटर?
कंपनी तो नहीं दिया है सर।
साइड पे देख सकते हैं कि साफ दिख रहा है कि पोल्यूशन का स्तर क्या है। उसके बावजूद भी चोरी छिपे इस साइड के अंदर काम चल रहा है और कोई कहने सुनने वाला नहीं। हमने खुद ट्रैक्टर ट्रॉली को रोडिया शिफ्ट करते हुए देखा, अंदर जेसीबी चलते हुए देखा। ये भी वरिंदा कंस्ट्रक्शन की साइट है और इससे पहले भी जो साइट थी वो भी वरिंदा कंस्ट्रक्शन की साइट थी। गार्ड साफ साफ झूठ बोल रहे हैं कि यहाँ पर काम नहीं चल रहा है। सबको पता काम चल रहा है।
This is not just one site. From Sarojini Nagar to Netaji Nagar, the same story repeats. Behind tall sheets, construction continued in secrecy. The violations didn't stop there. At midnight at the Delhi-Noida border, police checks appeared to be strict. Only BS6 and CNG vehicles were allowed. Construction material was completely banned. On paper, enforcement looked airtight, but the ground reality told a different story. Despite the ban, BS4 trucks were found to be freely moving inside Delhi.
क्या उतार के आया है?
20 रोड़ी रोड़ी
तो तेरे को दिल्ली में घुसने दे दिया कहाँ से?
कापा सेड़ माते
Similar free runs for polluting trucks were seen at Ames and Shahda. So the question isn't just about violation. Can this happen without criminal collusion? With Nitin Jain and video journalist Emmanuel, Bureau Report, India Today.
And let's raise the big questions tonight. Why is there still no urgency on resolving this country's air emergency? It may be severe in Delhi, but several other parts of the country have also seen worsening air quality. Are the government's pollution efforts too little, too late? Why is Parliament, for example, not even debating this issue? Are there any easy solutions out there? Joining me now are Vimlendu Jha, is an environmentalist who's been tracking this issue for a long time. Professor Joyita Gupta is Professor of Environment and Development at the Amsterdam Institute for Social Science Research. I appreciate both of you joining us. Vimlendu Jha, the government is saying, look, we brought in several measures, particularly in the last 24 hours. We made it compulsory. If you want to purchase petrol at a station, you've got to have your pollution certificates in place. We are putting in place 50% work from home norms. We are controlling vehicles that are emitting polluting air. They are saying we are making efforts. Do you believe it's too little, too late, that there isn't enough understanding yet of the gravity of this issue?
So Rajdeep, these are GRAP measures, these are reactive measures, these are band-aid measures, these are only measures which actually can qualify as tokenism. The kind of issue that we're talking about, one, it is tokenism, the other is it's very, very Delhi-centric. One thing that we need to understand, that air pollution crisis is a pan-India crisis and not just a Delhi-centric crisis. So, three problems that we actually have with regard to air pollution is that we've kept it Delhi-centric largely, we have believed in denial of data and denial of pollution to a large extent, and anything in the name of governance, we only hide behind GRAP in that sense. So your story right now, in terms of violations that we were talking about, are violations of restrictions. That still doesn't give us a picture as a country in terms of how are we actually in the long term combating air pollution per se. And that's the reason why the biggest frustration and disappointment is that the opportunity that we have right now, or India has, or India's parliament has, to discuss this issue and perhaps look at long-term and medium-term measures, because we all know that by just shutting down construction for a night or some BS3, BS4, BS6 measures is not going to solve the problem. We will have to look at that big-ticket issues of overall.
In fact, our story is showing construction is continuing. Vimlendu, sorry to intervene. Our story is showing
so
construction is still continuing in the heart of the capital.
Absolutely, Rajdeep. So imagine whatever little that the government claims that it's actually pretending to do, even that is being violated. So imagine GRAP is not governance, GRAP is reactive. GRAP, anyway, this entire measure, if everything was done 100%, still do you think the air quality index would have come down to 100 given the situation that we have? But at least from the intent point of view, I would say that all of this is headline management, perception management rather than pollution management, and still is very, very Delhi-centric. Of course, these measures are only applied in Delhi. What about Lucknow? Do we have these restrictions in Lucknow? And that's the reason why that discussion in the parliament is extremely important, because we, at least for the next 5 years, we need Beijing-like plan, a London-like plan to really address this issue long term, because we can't do, season to season, month to month, one GRAP to another GRAP to another GRAP. That's because this season, that's exactly what we've done. Like imagine day before yesterday, there was GRAP 4 and suddenly the wind speed increased and we came back to GRAP 3 and suddenly today there's more smog and we perhaps will be in GRAP 4 plus. Is that called governance? And that's the most unfortunate part, that we have been reactive, we have been tentative, we have been very impulsive, we have only been Delhi-centric, and we've only lived in denial. So largely, if you look at the first 15 days of this pollution season, so to say, of course, pollution season, unfortunately, we only call October to January as pollution season. Reality is that India's air, and more so Delhi's air, remains in poor category through the year, but initially, for the first 15 days, Delhi government as well as the central government completely denied that this is a problem. In fact, till yesterday the environment minister kept saying of India and also of Delhi that we are doing better. In fact, environment minister said that this year we haven't touched 450 plus, and then on the 15th of December we actually were 800 plus in that sense. So, I feel very, very disappointed that it's a lost opportunity if the parliament tomorrow doesn't gear up. This entire and GRAM and whatever other issues can wait. This is the most pressing issue for India.
The fact is, of course, I am not sure whether a parliament discussion will change anything. It's not about discussion, it's also about political will, about actually finding solutions. But Professor Gupta, to get your initial comments, do you believe that governments are treating this as a band-aid issue, to use Vimlendu Jha's words, that it needs surgery, you need major transformation in the way public transport is prioritized, in the way in which polluting industries are taken outside the big cities? You're not going to, band-aid is not going to work anymore. Do you believe that's going to change in the near future, or do you believe there's a chalta hai attitude year after year? The problem is there, no one wants to resolve it. Is it an issue of a lack of political will, lack of citizen awareness? Where is the problem?
I think it's a problem of lack of political will, but maybe the lack of political will is also embedded in a lack of understanding that if you really manage your system properly, you get clean air, clean water, your soil regenerates itself, your environment functions, your bees multiply, and therefore you have enough food. So the entire ecosystem, understanding how we need to nurture our ecosystem so that it nurtures us back, is more important than trying to tell everybody to buy an air purifier or a water purifier, which is the current situation in Delhi, and which is what I have been watching over the last 30 years in India as well. So what I've seen is that standards for air pollution are ignored. And why are we reaching a point that it is to reach an emergency? Why can't we just reach the standards that are required? Now, this requires us to think differently. I believe that the cost of inaction on air pollution and water pollution is much greater than the cost of action. The question is, who is going to pay? And of course, it has to be those who benefit the most. Unfortunately, in your video, you show us people who are on the streets. They will suffer the most from the air pollution, but they're also the small guy. We really need to understand how the entire structure is organized, how our economy is planned, how the way in which we are promoting private transport as opposed to public transport and shared transport. So you need a systemic approach. And this, if you understand the systemic approach, you will realize that the cost of action is much less than the cost of inaction. I mean, just to go to the cost of inaction, you not only have people who are falling sick.
Let me come for a moment to specific solutions, and because I think we need to find the solutions. I just want to put, for example, first an audit that we did of what has happened over the last 10 years in terms of steps to fight pollution. Phasing out of 15-year-old petrol and 10-year-old diesel vehicles has been mostly enforced. Bharat Stage 6 emission norms introduced in 2020, mostly enforced. Use of electrical vehicles has been incentivized, but the record is very spotty. CNG autos and buses enforced, but remember, this came through a law, through the courts, not through political will. The odd-even scheme, rationing scheme, was attempted by the Aam Aadmi Party government first in Delhi. It's been tried, but it's not succeeded to the extent that one might have hoped. Many believe that it was again an ad hoc solution. Subsidies for machinery, biodecomposers to curb stubble burning, in practice yet to take off. But the truth of the matter is, stubble burning accounts for a very small percentage of pollution. Very easy then to blame the farmers alone. Mobile water sprinklers and anti-smoke guns to manage dust. It's in practice, but no one knows whether it's really working. Remember, the Chief Minister of Delhi went to the extent of suggesting AQI is a bit like a thermometer. I think she needs a little bit more information and education in that matter. Smog towers at multiple locations. Frankly, it's been a complete flop. Cloud seeding didn't take off again. Mechanical road sweeping is in practice. Vimlendu Jha, I just listed this as an audit because the governments will argue they've been attempting various measures, they haven't quite taken off. Do you believe there is a solution out there, or there are no easy solutions given the scale of the problem?
So, Rajdeep, there are easy solutions and there are systemic solutions. But before that, let me comment on the long list that you actually gave in terms of what the government attempted to do or has already done. Reality is that if all these things were proportionate to the kind of crisis that we are actually facing, then we would not be in this crisis that we are facing. So therefore, these things are either wrong solutions or are not adequate solutions in that sense. And the reason why I say that half of them are voodoo solutions or wrong solutions, because they were not supposed to work. As in the Smog Tower was not supposed to work because at best it can only clean 200 square meters of the area, and it's a very, very expensive affair. Similarly, cloud seeding has not worked anywhere in this world except for drought purposes than for clean air, and therefore it is anyway not supposed to work. Similarly, if you look at the allocation of budget in terms of a clean air program, the budget of India has been 20,000 crores for 6 years for 130 cities, which comes to around 25 crore per city per year, which is peanuts compared to many other places in the world that have actually been able to clean the air. So what Yogita ji was actually talking about, and what you said, that is lack of political will, that's the first thing. Now in terms of solution, what the government can achieve in 1 week marginally, and therefore perhaps will have an impact very, very soon. The 15 coal thermal power plants that we actually have in the immediate periphery of Delhi. Of course, this solution is Delhi centric because Delhi NCR, of course, has worse pollution than many other parts in that sense. Why can't we actually follow the emission norms, the sulfur dioxide emission norms of these thermal power plants to begin with in Delhi NCR and throughout the year? So therefore, I'm not saying that, make those coal thermal power plants overnight into gas run coal thermal power plants, but their emission norms need to be followed. Similarly, public transport infrastructure, not just of Delhi, but of entire Delhi NCR region, and also of many of those urban cities, and why not of Lucknow, of Kolkata, of all other areas, and that will need investment. And as Joyita said, that the World Bank says that the loss of GDP because of air pollution is almost 1.5% to 3%. Imagine next year onwards, if 3% of India's GDP is actually allocated to air pollution mitigation, and will not need extra money to really solve this. Similarly, the emission standards in terms of the polluting industries that we're talking about, or for that matter, construction demolition norms. And we need to understand one thing: governance of air quality cannot be top down. We cannot have babus and secretaries and CAQMs. We need Central Pollution Control Board and Delhi and State Pollution Control Boards to be empowered, both in terms of resource, in terms of money, and in terms of teeth. And reality is that 50% of the vacancy exists in Central Pollution Control Board. So you need adequate money, you need teeth, you need bottom strong manpower, you need great public transport, which you can actually achieve in 3 years' time. You need to shut down these polluting industries and coal thermal power plants, and make sure, and at the same time, as Yogita said, that imagine it has to be an ecosystem approach. Do you think the destruction of Aravallis affect Delhi's air? Yes, destruction, design of Aravali that we are actually talking about will affect Delhi's air and Delhi's water. Similarly, the ridge management, similarly, many other issues will have to be looked at it together. And of course, the stubble burning. So I think that unless we look at it from an interministerial, interdepartmental. So finance, health,
you're saying you need a comprehensive plan.
Environment,
it cannot work in silos. I take your point. It cannot work in silos. Truth of the matter is, as the question in Parliament showed, there have been very few meetings that have taken place actually that have involved all the stakeholders. And unless that happens, nothing is going to change. I want a final word from you there, Professor Gupta. We've seen countries like China achieve it. A friend of mine just came back from Shanghai and said the AQI there was 30 or 40, and you compare it with India, where it's in some parts over 400, 500. What did Beijing and China do that we can? Is there something we can do, at least in the short term, that can actually substantially reduce the problem?
In the short term, I'm not entirely sure you can do it without pain somewhere. But in fact, some of these measures have already been mentioned by Vimlendu. The most important thing for me is that we should now at least start with all the steps for the long-term improvement, because it's not just a problem in the winter months. It's all through the year and it continues. And the number of people who are falling sick in India, especially the people who live in the slums, who don't have houses, but also the children who are playing outside, elderly people who go for walks or jogs, everybody is suffering. And it is a regional problem. It's not a Delhi problem. I'd like to reconfirm that. It's also a matter of national strategy. What do we prioritize? Do we prioritize environmental standards? Do we prioritize trying to meet them and making sure that the permits that are allocated to different actors in the society add up to the ambient quality standard? Or are we just giving permits without thinking about the relationship with the ambient quality standard? And this is not just about air, it's also about the way we deal with water, it's about the way we deal with the environment. So we do need to sit down together and really get the story right. And in the whole process, we must make sure it's not the poorest people who are paying the bill. It's not the children who are paying the bill. It's not the senior citizens. It must be the broadest shoulders in society. And because political will not happen overnight, it is really important for children, for schools, for universities to make demands for this change. You need a social movement to put the pressure. You need the journalists like you to discuss this and demand from government that they respond, and better sooner than later. And by the way, if you are going to take a systemic approach, take climate change on board, because all the solutions on water that you're thinking about will not work if we have climate change getting worse and worse, as we can see already. I'd like to say that a healthy
the fact at the end of the matter is, I can only say this year, I can only say that year after year we debate it. We often make the mistake perhaps of debating it only in pollution season. But the problem can't be resolved by journalists. The problem has to be resolved by those in power. Are you willing to prioritize the environment? Look at the deforestation that's going on in state after state. Travel to Uttarakhand, travel to Himachal. Look at the manner in which the coastlines of this country are being destroyed. Travel to Goa. Look at the larger environmental crisis that's going to build upon us. It may not be an issue that will win or lose you an election like dharma or jati does, like religion or caste does, but for God's sake, for the sake of our children, look at environment, look at pollution as the major issues of our time, which is why we will continue to focus on this on the show. But I appreciate my guests joining me. I want to turn to the issue that stoked up a big political row, and that is the GRAP issue. That's right. That's the issue which has stirred up a real political ruckus. The latest legislation brought in by the Narendra Modi government, this time for rural employment, to replace the UPA's flagship Manrega scheme. Today in Parliament, we saw unruly scenes when the opposition tore the bill, even as the Agriculture Minister was making his stand clear. The fact is, should such bills have gone through legislative scrutiny, or are they being bulldozed? The politics of the GRAP bill is our other story.
Pandemonium in the Lok Sabha. The House descended into chaos as the Viksit Bharat GRAP bill was passed amid uproar, with opposition MPs tearing copies of the legislation and raising slogans against the Narendra Modi government. As tempers flared, the Speaker warned the opposition, calling the disruption a violation of parliamentary decorum before putting the contentious bill to vote.
सदस्य आपको देश की जनता ने कागज फेंकने के लिए नहीं भेजा है, आपको चर्चा करने के लिए भेजा है.
The government defended the move, saying the bill that will replace the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act serves public interest.
तो नाम रखने की सनक इनकी है माननीय अध्यक्ष महोदय. मोदी सरकार तो केवल काम करना चाहती है, केवल काम में हमारा विश्वास है.
विधेयक पर विचार करने तो प्रस्ताव स्वीकृत किया जाए जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में आ गए.
The opposition hit back, alleging the government rammed the legislation through the House without meaningful discussion.
विधेयक पर विचार करने तो प्रस्ताव को स्वीकृत किया. अब सभा विधेयक पर खंडवार विचार करेगी।
वैसे ही आस्ते आस्ते ये स्कीम खत्म हो जाएगी, क्योंकि प्रदेश की सरकारों के पास इतना पैसा है नहीं। तो ये एकदम श्रमिकों के खिलाफ है, मजदूरों के खिलाफ है, गरीबों के खिलाफ है, और इसका हम सख्त से सख्त विरोध करेंगे।
Earlier, opposition parties had staged protests inside the House, warning that tensions would escalate if the bill was forced through.
जैसा अमर्यादित आचरण का प्रदर्शन हुआ, कागज फाड़ के उछाले गए, आसंदी के सामने टेबलों पे चढ़ गए, क्या ये बापू जी के आदर्शों की हत्या नहीं है?
मनरेगा का बदलने का या नाम बदलने का नहीं है, ये अपने हकूक है, राइट टू वर्क। ये जो हक हमने दिया था, उस हक को छीन ले रहे हैं।
यही गुंडागर्दी और इसी से हम परेशान हैं। जब से हम नए सांसद जब से आए हुए हैं, तब से यही गुंडागर्दी देख रहे हैं।
The bill, which replaces the 20-year-old Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, proposes a statutory guarantee of 125 days of wage employment in a financial year for every rural household whose adult members are willing to undertake unskilled manual work. It, however, reduces central funding from 100% for labour cost under Manrega to 60% for most states under GRAP bill. Despite chaos and confrontation, the GRAP bill has cleared the Lok Sabha. The government calls it reform. The opposition calls it an attack on welfare. What is clear is that this legislation has ignited a political battle that is set to spill beyond Parliament. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, that was not the only slugfest that we saw in Parliament today. There was another major landmark bill that was passed by Parliament, this time in the Rajya Sabha too, the Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India Bill 2025, or the SHANTI Bill. What does the SHANTI Bill do? It's India's new civil nuclear bill that will pave the way for private operators now to function in the nuclear energy arena. The opposition is claiming this will lead to private monopolies and favored private players getting an entry into the nuclear energy sector, thereby compromising, they say, safety. The government says nuclear energy is the future. Take a look.
I rise to move for leave to introduce the Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India Bill 2025.
The Narendra Modi government is opening up India's nuclear sector.
जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में आ गए हैं।
The Lok Sabha on Wednesday passed the Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India Bill 2025, or the SHANTI Bill, replacing the Atomic Energy Act of 1962 and the Civil Liability of Nuclear Damage Act passed by the UPA in 2010. The bill enables private and joint venture participation, retains government control over sensitive areas, grants statutory backing to Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, creates dedicated atomic disputes tribunals, enables deployment of indigenous reactor designs, and ends monopoly of Nuclear Power Corporation of India. The government claims these reforms will help in raising the country's nuclear capacity from 8.88 gigawatt to 22 gigawatt by 2032 and 100 gigawatt by 2047.
This bill is coming simply because the scenario has changed. But we have retained what is relevant today. We have tried to introduce what is relevant in the changed context and also try to slightly modify it.
In the changed technological context.
The opposition, however, opposed the bill. It claims the new land dilutes the liability of nuclear operators in the event of an accident.
We cannot allow the pursuit of capital to override the non-negotiable requirements of public safety, environmental protection, and victim justice. The name Shanti means peace, sustainability. Let us ensure that this name is not a cruel irony in the aftermath of a preventable disaster.
I think so.
The promise of transforming India ought not to conflate the risk of scarring.
Critics of the Shanti bill also accuse the Modi government of caving into pressure from the US and opening up the sector to private companies. Nuclear laws have also remained a political flashpoint. When the UPA government under Manmohan Singh passed the civil liability bill, it had faced similar opposition from the BJP. Despite many milestones in nuclear research, India's nuclear sector has failed to take off. Bureau Report, India Today.
So how is this new nuclear law that's going to come into place different from the civil nuclear law that was passed by the UPA when they were in power? The 2010 Act allowed operators to sue suppliers for compensation. The new law removes the operator's right to sue suppliers. They can only take recourse to it if it is specified in the contract. Under the old law, there was state monopoly on nuclear plant operations. Now, any company except those incorporated outside India can run, build nuclear reactors, even store nuclear material. The maximum operator liability is fixed at 1,500 crores under the old law. The new law provides liability from 100 crores to 3,000 crores, but based on plant capacity. The old law was only civil liberty. The new law consolidates liability and general provisions. It gives the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board statutory recognition. Big questions. Is opening up the nuclear energy industry to private players really in the national interest? Is the new law making nuclear suppliers liability free? Is public safety losing out to commercial interests? Should the new bill have gone through proper parliamentary scrutiny? Political face-off. Joining me now, Pradeep Bhandari, BJP spokesperson, G. Kumar Naik, Congress MP. Pradeep Bhandari, the charge against this bill is that it is essentially going to allow the government's favored oligarchs, as they are being called, to enter nuclear energy sector and will exclude the suppliers of components and fuel from liability in the event of damages caused. So if, God forbid, an accident takes place, the supplier will not be liable. How do you respond that public safety is being compromised for private profit?
Well, Rajdeep ji, at the outset, the essence of the bill is that we have to achieve energy independence, energy Atmanirbharta by 2047. And what the UPA got, you and I, and in fact, your opening package also suggested that there has been a meager growth in the nuclear energy sector. And it is extremely critical in the era of AI supercomputers, where energy needs of India will quadruple, that nuclear energy at least grows to 22 gigawatt and eventually to 100 gigawatt. So the essence is the following of the bill. Now coming to your concerns, and I will address this one by one. A, the supplier liability has not completely gone off. It has shifted towards operator liability, and even the supplier liability through a written contract, there is limited supplier liability. Point number 2 on your charge that it will open up oligarchs. It is a fictitious charge. Allow me to read it from the bill, and I read it from the chapter 2, where it says that the following has been opened. A government company exists or any other company, also a JV. So what you are doing is you are promoting domestic private investment to come into operationalization of the nuclear reactor. Along with that, you are also allowing foreign investment into the supply of nuclear reactor. Because your eventual aim is that India should just not operate nuclear reactors, but small and medium reactors should also be supplied by India globally. And the global standard on any operational safeguard or safety is what we have gotten. So you would expect Indian companies, when they supply nuclear reactors to other companies, to go through standards which are globally competitive. So you would expect the similar when global companies supply small and medium reactors to India. So there is no word off. And allow me to reiterate a 1986 Supreme Court judgment in MC Mehta versus Union of India, which speaks about the doctrine of absolute liability. And this doctrine of absolute liability exists, where even in the case of any amount of any significant hazardous situation in this industry, the operator will be liable and the supplier in a limited manner through the written contract. So we here have the objective to increase our energy independence, and there it becomes very critical.
Still a question. Sir, there is still a question. You use the word, sir, you use the word Atmanirbhar, Mr. Bhandari, and there will be a question mark over whether you needed these clauses to make yourself Atmanirbhar, or to actually, some are suggesting, surrender to foreign interests who will now perhaps get an entry into India's nuclear energy sector without sufficient liability in the event of an accident. But that is your viewpoint. I want to bring the other viewpoint. G. Kumar Naik, you heard Pradeep Bhandari saying this is fear mongering, to say oligarchization will take place, to suggest that suppliers will have absolutely no risk, to suggest that only private players from abroad will come in. There could be joint ventures, and you desperately need nuclear energy to expand. How do you respond to those who say this bill is needed at this particular time if we have to increase our nuclear energy capacity?
Need of the hour is to definitely increase the proportion of nuclear energy. About that, let's have no doubt. But however, it's a way that we want to chart for ourselves. The bill which is proposed now, which has been passed in the Parliament, is very clear. So let us read this section 31C and 31E. It makes it very clear that the government can open up this sector for anybody, not only company of Indian origin, it can be of any private person, individual, foreign, national, and the private companies, foreign companies are open to participate in the entire process. While that is most welcome, what is the kind of safeguard that we have? This kind of a pro-concentration tilt that is there in the bill is very obvious. The various operations like mining, operation, and waste disposal, entire thing can be given to one single operator, single private participant. This is too much of a risk to be deposited, to be put on one particular person. This increases the systemic risk and the chances of catastrophe in various parts of the country. See, today we had a liability cap in the previous act also, 2010 act. However, this was a chance we could have rework the entire the liability clauses properly. We have lost that opportunity. About the supplier being very safe, we had the right to recourse in 2010 Act, which was passed by the UPA, whereas this completely takes away that and makes the supplier completely free of risk. This is not called for. It gives a clear suspicion that.
But as a result, major.
Clear suspicion
sir,
that.
But after the 2010 Act was passed, sir, after the 2010 Act was passed, there wasn't sufficient interest, therefore, shown in private companies entering India's nuclear energy market because there were barriers. Those barriers are being removed. How else are you going to expand capacity? What is the other way to do it? Are you talking of only public-private partnerships? Is that the way you would take it forward?
No, let's have everybody participate in that. But it can't be a total highway for the private participants, and the people who are at risk are the people of this country. Ultimately, if the liability is capped at a mere 300 SDR, 300 million special drawing rights, which amounts not more than about 3,900 crores, which is pittance when compared to the kind of liability that is going to emerge in case of a catastrophe. We have seen in Chernobyl or Fukushima, it runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. Ultimately, who is going to pay for all this? It is the budget of the government of India that will have to pay.
Keep a cap.
We don't have no proper insurance here in the country.
I take your point. I take your point. Therefore, Pradeep Bhandari, in conclusion, surely more safeguards were needed. Nobody is denying that you need to expand the nuclear energy sector, Pradeep Bhandari, but it should come with safeguards. It almost seems as if there is some kind of pressure, perhaps being put by suppliers in foreign countries, that we do not want to be burdened with certain liabilities, and hence the bill is being perceived by some as against the national interest. God forbid if there is a major nuclear accident.
Well, Rajdeep ji, you be assured that we are not the government which will let Anderson run away in such such a black swan event if it arises. Point number one. Point number two, one factual inaccuracy in my learned gentleman from the Congress party. He spoke about radioactive waste. There is no private player which is involved in the transportation, processing, storage or disposal of the radioactive waste, or whether it is heavy water or anything to do with the supply of the nuclear fuel. So that continues to be completely under the central government. Point number 3, the liability is not limited to 3,000 crore in an eventuality where the central government in public interest can pay liability. Beyond that, the clause exists in the bill. The essence here is the following, Rajdeep ji. What the UPA got in 2010, if it would have worked, then between 2010 and 2014, you would have at least, or till now, you would have expected the nuclear energy sector to at least grow by double digit. The growth has been a mere 3%, which the gentleman from the Congress also admits. Here again, even in the supplier part, if you go ahead in the CLNDA, there was no supplier liability even in the earlier act. Now there is a limited supplier liability through a return contract and absolute operator liability. So the liability clause has not gone off, it has only shifted. So largely what we have to see here is this is not, India is not the singular country which is bringing this, Rajdeep ji. What we are bringing as a liability provision exists in other countries which have a more developed nuclear energy sector, and we would also expect our Indian companies to be exporters of nuclear energy and nuclear suppliers.
The nuclear energy has not taken off for various reasons.
As I said, this is a show. This is a show where we try and bring different viewpoints on critical issues of national importance. I appreciate my guest joining us. Our Get Real India story, which is a heart-wrenching tale from Maharashtra, where a farmer was forced to travel to Cambodia and sell his kidney. This because he had now incurred a loan which had started off at 1 lakh but eventually had ballooned with interest to 74 lakhs. What did the farmer do? He sold his kidney. Our Get Real India story is the tragic story of Roshan Sadashiv Kule. Take a look at what it takes sometimes to sell your kidney.
A farmer caught in a web of moneylenders ends up selling his kidney, but is still left with debt to repay. Roshan Sadashiv Kule, who lives in Minthur village in Maharashtra's Chandrapur district, approached police with a shocking complaint. Roshan's trouble started in 2021 when he borrowed 1 lakh rupees from 2 moneylenders to buy cows which died. To repay debt, he claims to have taken loans from other moneylenders at a huge rate of interest. Soon he was trapped in a vicious cycle of debt, with principal and interest allegedly rising to 74 lakh rupees. Roshan sold 2 acres of land and a tractor. Then he claims to have contacted an online agent to sell his kidney. The surgery allegedly took place in Cambodia in October 2024. But the 8 lakh rupees he got was still not enough to clear his debt.
यांनी केलेली अशी पिळवणूक भरपूर गंभीर प्रकारची आहे. आज 4 महिने झाला मी न्यायासाठी हिंडतो पण न्याय मिळत नाही. माझी सरकारला एवढीच विनंती आहे की मला न्याय मिळवून द्यावा. माझी गेलेली प्रॉपर्टी मला मिळण्यात यावी.
Based on Roshan's complaint, police have booked 6 moneylenders. 5 of them are arrested.
आमच्याकडे पुरावा भेटल्यानंतर आम्ही लगेच त्यांच्यावर आता गुन्हा दाखल करण्याची प्रक्रिया सुरू केलेला आहे. त्यावर आम्ही सावकारी अधिनियमच्या जे कलम 29, 30, 31 च्या कलम आणि एक्स्टॉर्शनच्या कलम मागच्या वर्षी ऑक्टोबर महिन्यामध्ये त्यांनी ते असं बोलताय की ते किडनी विकलेला आहे. तो त्या अनुषंगाने आतापर्यंत चौकशी पूर्ण झालेल्या नाहीये. तरी पण ते ट्रान्झॅक्शन बघितलं असेल तर काही आरोपीच्या अकाउंटवर त्यांना पैसे अकाउंटला पैसे पाठवलेले आहे आणि पैसे पण घेतलेले आहे.
Roshan Kule is hoping stern action by the police which help him to recover his lost money. With Vikash Rajurkar, Bureau Report, India Today.
Those are the stories that you won't get elsewhere on prime time. We try and bring as far as possible stories from different corners of the country on Get Real India. For now, that's all that we could pack in tonight. You stay well, stay safe, good night, Shubh Ratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar.